and welcome to this video from zonalaudio.com. What you've been hearing there is part of our new product Zed Op. It is 100 presets for Ableton's operator instrument. It comes in rack, channel, audio and MIDI, and it also includes this template that we're going to look over today. They can be downloaded separately or as a package on the whole. Today we're mainly going to be looking at the sound design, and we'll also touch on some of the processing, as it is quite important for some of the patches. Don't forget, if you like this kind of content, to like and subscribe. All of the .alc actually comes with MIDI. So we've saved the MIDI separately. So we've got .adg, which is the rack preset, and then also the clips. So if I wanted to just load on chord, drag and drop this into an empty space, it loads the MIDI file with the instrument. So the vast majority of the presets do have things mapped to macros, and then some of them have a few variations, or like this one, quite a few. We'll play through what we've got here. This live set comes with the download as well, and we can look at it as like a sketchpad, some song starters to really exhibit what these samples can do. You've already heard the first one there. All of the sounds, apart from these ones in grey, are done using operator. So the kick, the clap, the hats, with some extra loops, and all the loops are from our packs Tales of the Deep and Driving Techno Essentials, and we'll put a link to those in the description. Vast majority of the sound is the operator presets, and then we just use these loops for a bit of extra groove and glue. So let's play through a few more of these examples. You'll notice some markers here, which is essentially a suggested BPM. We start off with quite deep, dubby, organic, housey, techy kind of sounds, moving into more kind of tougher, hard groove techno. So for this one, 125 to 128. big range of sounds there. Let's skip back to the first one and start looking at the sound design. And we'll start with the kick. Ableton is a super powerful instrument and we can get a huge range of sounds, anything percussive to leads, basses, and really quite crazy sounds. So here's the kick. So a really simple, sturdy kick. Just to jump into the sound design, it's essentially a sine wave, which has got a pitch envelope on it and also a filter envelope. We're also using oscillator B just for a bit of extra tick and attack to the kick. So the algorithm we're using isn't actually an FM algorithm for this one. The way operator works is by default, each operator is fed into one another. And in FM synthesis, the operator that makes a sound is called a carrier and the others are called modulators. So by default, when you open operator up, we have 3 modulators and 1 carrier. Essentially here we've got a kind of subtractive synthesis where they're all sounding at the same time. And if I were to take off A, B is just this noise looped waveform with a very tight decay and just gives us that attack portion of the sound. So to listen to this without the filter and pitch envelopes, fairly short, low sine wave. And then when we add these in, so the envelope isn't actually acting there. We're just using the filter to give a bit of a bump in the low end, but it's really the pitch envelope that gives the sound. And we've mapped a few of these things to macros so we can alter it. As it is in this example, just a very tight, sturdy kick. But when we increase these macros, we can change the sound significantly. So the pitch env sus is mapped to this one here, and this determines how low it's going to go. So when we increase this with the pitch down to 0, we don't really hear it. It's only when we increase the decay, which is the decay of the operator A, we start to hear the change. So we can go from a very tight, snappy kick to something much deeper and boomer. The warmer knob is just mapped to saturator, and then we have the high pass here, which is more for performance and automation. So now let's move on to the bass, which is altogether a much more interesting sound. In this instance, it's just used to kind of help the track chug along. But we can get some much more interesting tones from this. So as mentioned with the algorithms, with this one, we have A being the carrier and all the others affecting A independently. So we can turn these up using these macros here. So with this particular patch, operator A is a fixed frequency. So this gives us lots of flexibility as to how the sound is going to reproduce. It's labelled as a bass, but there's quite a lot of options here to make it something other than a bass. Do bear in mind that when we use it in this way, the note that we're playing on the keyboard isn't necessarily accurate, so it's more determined by this frequency than the note we're playing on the keyboard. And then we have some filter controls here. And we can turn up the resonance and make it a bit more kind of like an acid sound. So yeah, we can increase the harmonic complexity of this sound significantly just with a few controls. The time macro here is on the time parameter of operator and gives us more control over the length of the sound. The sustain is the sustain of operator A. And then this one is the envelope decay. Sorry, the decay of A is also. And then we have some processing. Yeah, massive variety of sounds from this one patch. Let's just listen to some of the variations. Moving on to the next one, which is a clap. So again, much more simplified in the sound design. Claps can be both quite easy and quite tricky to make sound good. In its essence, it's a white noise waveform with a fairly sharp attack and sustain. But what we've done here is utilize the trigger and loop envelopes to give kind of a rattle sound, almost recreating a group of people clapping together. So that's oscillator B, just giving a standard clap, and then we can mix in these rattles. So without oscillator B, we get that rattle sound. So a really nice way to add texture to the sound. Quite a lot of processing here. Let's just have a quick look at it. So overdrive, pretty much in its default state. We're using the Live 11 hybrid reverb, and that is what this room knob is mapped to. So very subtle, just sort of gives it a space, and then a little bit of saturation and some EQ. So the processing is quite important. You can hear without all that, it sounds a little bit weak. Okay, so let's move on to the hats. We've got two hi-hat presets here. One is playing pretty much offbeat with a little skip. And the other one 16th. But you'll notice the MIDI has some natural groove added into it. So significant changes in velocity, and some of these are off the grid here. One of the fun things to do with hi-hats that we've synthesized ourselves is add in some random movement. This is something that you can get from samples, but only if it's recorded in that way. It's very hard to add that in. So here we have an LFO mapped to the movement knob. I'm just going to disable that and we'll look at the mapping. So we have movement going to LFO global amount. Within operator here, if we look at the LFO, it is disabled from all the standard destinations and then routed to the time. And then we have the move rate, which is the LFO rate. A really nice way to add in some kind of human feel to the movement. And then for the template, we have exaggerated that by moving the movement knob. So to look at the sound design, looks quite complex. Essentially, we're routing all of these into what is a square wave on a fixed frequency, which we can determine here. The last one being a square wave, and then we have another square wave, and then another square wave, and then another square wave. But the way we are pushing into each one gives a tone that is much closer to noise. And the shaper is also helping with this on the filter. So again, a really nice way to get interesting and unique sounds, much more than you can do with a sample. Let's look at this next hi-hat patch. Just gone for the one macro here for the decay. And obviously that's great to automate throughout a track. In terms of the sound design, a little bit more simple. The main wave is noise white, and then we have A being a carrier, and also B, which is modulated by C. So B is a triangle, and that is modulated by noise. So just sort of thickens up the sound, and then a little bit of processing to make it a bit noisier and louder and more hi-hat like. And obviously you can go in and edit that processing if you wish. Okay, so onto a little more interesting sound now, which is this lead sound. So in terms of the algorithm, we have A and C as carriers, and then B and D as modulators, D not being used in this instance, but B is modulating A. One of the key things about this sound is the LFO. So we've got it set to high, but then fairly low on the actual knob, and then a very small amount. And this just wavers the pitch slightly, giving it that kind of more analog-y feel. And then let's look through some of the scene captures here. So again, a big variation of sounds just from the same patch. In its standard state, you could say, it's quite clean. And what really makes it a bit more inharmonic is the fine tune of D, which is mapped to this macro here. So that's really what gives the character of the sound, and you can obviously dial this into taste depending on what kind of style you're making. Okay, the next one is a lead bass. Okay, so obviously some automation on the EQ there with the musical example in mind. Just going to disable that for now and we can hear the full spectrum of the sound. So we're in this subtractive mode, so all of these are acting independently, and again it's the fine tune that gives the character of the sound. So if we bring these down, and then we've got this one mapped to high OSC, you can see this is tuned up. So on the macro control, C is kind of what gives this sound that little bit extra. We've got the detune mapped here and the coarse pitch mapped here. So you could hear there when I was increasing it up to like 3 and 4, we were getting a really interesting overtone, which you may want to use or you may want to keep it quite low. Kind of depends on the rest of the content within the track. But yeah, that's the main thing about the sound design of this track is they are all saw waves, slightly detuned from one another. And it's that detune that really gives it the big sound. We have also mapped a macro to the spread, quite similar to Unison, just gives it some stereo width. And then in terms of the processing that you saw me do here, we have echo and then also an auto pan just set up to be a basic sidechain. So this can be really good for performative or automation within a track. particularly good if you've got a MIDI controller like an APC40 or Ableton Push, which has macros automatically mapped. So that's it for this example. Let's take a look at the next one. So another kick here. And again, in this kind of default state, it's pretty safe, pretty sturdy, nice, warm, but nothing too exciting. There's a little bit of a rumble going on there. So that is this chain here, where we have a dry chain and then an echo on 100% wet. And the most important thing about this is that the low pass is brought right down. Just gives it that nice rumbly bass. Obviously this is too much, so we bring that right down. And again, some parameters just so you can make it fit in with whatever it is you're trying to do. Let's have a quick listen to some of the variations. So just some filter cut on there, which is why the low end went out of the kick briefly there. Okay, in terms of the sound design, fairly simple. We have this sine 8-bit and then the pitch envelope on 100%, and this time the filter envelope is active. So we have it set to low pass with a significant amount of resonance, and then on the MS2 mode with hard shaper and then a little bit of drive. And then the envelope, or the pitch envelope. And we can adjust the decay of that here. So this one is the amp envelope and this one is the pitch envelope. So if this is right down, we won't really hear what this one's doing. But when it's up, gives the kick a little bit more body. Okay, we'll just have a really quick look at this bass line. It's mainly about the filter envelope, a square wave going into the MS2 filter on a high pass with quite a lot of envelope, which we can control here. Cool, and then we have another clap here. And for the purpose of the session, I've put this auto filter on, which has a little bit of movement. We'll just remove that for now. And then we've got quite a lot of variations for these. So we have some rattle, decay, reverb, and then we have some other verb as well. So again, a large variety of sounds just from one patch. So for this one, we're in subtractive mode, all operators sounding independently. And then we have the rattle level here. So the standard one, the first one is just a standard noise looped, and we have the decay mapped here. And then for the rattle, we're using the looping envelope. And that is mapped to the decay mod. If we turn this one down, changes the sound significantly, gives a different vibe to the clap that we want. And then we have another bright layer. More clap. And then obviously some pretty strong saturation here. Okay, so we'll look at the next hi-hat. So again, slightly different from the other one. So the texture here is the echo. And then in terms of the sound design, we've got two operators active, A being the carrier, B being the modulator, A on noise looped, and there's actually a little bit of attack on this one. And we've got a a pitch envelope. Just giving a nice little variation to the sound there. And then we've got the decay and release times. Okay, so let's look at this acid sound now. So not particularly acidic in this state, but if we play some lower notes and increase the resonance, so let me just add in some lower notes. You can hear with the filter movement and the filter resonance turned up high, we get that acid feel to the sound. The crunch is mapped to drum bus and the amp mapped to amp. And this really helps give it a more acidic sound. We're in subtractive mode. We're using a saw wave for oscillator A, square wave for oscillator B, and a sine wave for oscillator C. And you can hear they really help fatten up the sound. So with the filter, this is the key to acid sounds essentially, is the filter with quite a bit of drive. We're set on the MS2 setting, and yeah, it's cranking that resonance that really gives the acidic sound. So even on the lowest value, the macro is at 53% resonance. Okay, let's move on to this chord sound. So the processing is quite significant with this one. Lots of reverb and delay, giving it that kind of dubby feel. Without the processing, and we have a lot of the reverb and delay and saturation mapped here. So we'll just normalize the automation. And you'll notice we've got this velocity in front of the operator. That is just to give some random values to the velocity. We have the LFO mapped to the filter, and this is on the morph mode. And the macros have quite an effect on the shape of the envelope. At its core is just a saw wave, which is modulated by the envelope. And we do have a bit of oscillator being mixed in. And this is in the FM algorithm. So B is modulating A, and it gives it that slightly detuned sound. And we can increase that with this macro here. If I just lengthen the MIDI notes, we'll hear that more. Gives it a lot more of a tone. Let's have a listen to some of the variations. Okay, so we're going to move on to one of the tougher ones now. So this one suggested for dark and hypnotic techno. So let's increase the BPM to 138. The kick here is a little bit stronger than the other ones we've looked at so far. Let's take a listen. Also has a rumble that we can mix in. So So again, a nice solid kick, relies quite a bit on the processing. And then these. Essentially a series of EQ, saturation, compression, EQ, saturation, and then hitting a limiter at the end. In terms of the sound design, a similar thing where we have a sine wave, and that is pitched using an envelope. And it's tweaking these envelope settings that really make it sound like a kick. If I change these slightly, the sound will change drastically to the point where it's not really recognizable as a kick anymore. So it's really about finding that sweet spot. And then we have two other operators that just add a little bit more body and tick to the sound. So very subtle settings, but with all these down, it's a very nice, firm, easy kick to work with, but we can give it just a little bit more body and obviously some rumble if we want. There is rumble on the processing channel, but for this live set, we have also routed the kick into an audio channel, set the monitor to in, and then pushed it through a lot more reverb, delay, saturation, EQ. This low perk really adds to the rhythm. This is just a few one-shots from our Driving Techno Essentials pack. Okay, and then we have clap and hat that we've looked at already. A few more loops. Let's look at this bass sound, Dirt and Grit. This one is quite interesting. So in the project, these two macros, Dirt and Grit, are automated. And the way they are routed, we have this one is the OSC A sustain envelope. So this is this one. And then Grit is B envelope sustain. And these really change, but with them both down. We get a different tone, but combining where these are can give even more different tones. So just with a few parameters, we can really alter the sound, and these can be very nice to automate throughout a track, either in a kind of smooth, fast and abrasive about it. So for example, if I add these in here, and we'll do the same on this one and on this one. All kind of tones and rhythms with this one preset. It's just a square wave modulated by another square wave modulated by a saw wave. Quite a lot of processing here. That just gives a lot of kind of space and depth to the sound. So you see there's phaser, flanger, chorus and ensemble moving at fairly slow rates, so it's 6 bars and 12 hertz. And then also the echo has got quite a bit of filter modulation, and that really helps the sound just kind of move. This one's a little bit more unique in the fact that it's 2 oscillators stacked. The second one, acid, so in this example, just a nice little bit of ear candy keeps the track. In this example, just a nice bit of ear candy plays with a bit of call and response with the other elements. Let's take a look at this stab. So a fairly classic FM sound, roots of a donk bass essentially, where we have a sine wave modulated by another sine wave, the modulator being several octaves up, and we have the control of that here, so from 2 to 4 octaves. So that really changes the sound, and then we have the level control here. And also decay. So the more donkey we want the sound, the higher we would put this course. Okay, let's look at this hook patch now. So again, the premise is the same. A sine wave modulated with a sine wave. What makes this significantly different is we're playing it higher up the octave, and we have a fine tune for this one. Drive mapped to a macro. And obviously chorus, reverb, delay, sweetening up the sound. And this might work higher up the octaves as well. onto the final example in our sketchpad. We have another kick here. We are going into kind of harder territories here. Let's just have a listen to some of the variations. You can see there's a limiter in the rack anyway. And then this EQ, which looks kind of crazy and elaborate, this is based on the rest of the content that's being used with it. So although it's got some basic EQ here, you may want to EQ further based on other things that you've got going on in your project. In terms of the sound design, we're in the FM algorithm, and we have, again, pitch decay mapped the snap. So again, these are, so one's a sine, one's white noise to give more punch to the sound. Again, it's the pitch decay that really changes the sound, and all based off a sine wave again. Good for all types of kicks, this one's, from simple sturdy kick to quite hardcore. This dirt and grip we've already looked at. Let's look at this other acid sound. So in this example, it's used more just kind of a tom to emphasize the groove. But let's hear what else it can do. So just to demonstrate how versatile some of these patches are, let's put in a typical acid type pattern. So yeah, very fun to play around with some of these macros. We can, of course, randomize the macros. And that's available on all of them. So we have another hi-hat patch here. This one is quite interesting because we've used some LFOs. So we do need Ableton Suite for this, but you can see it modulates the attack of the amp envelope, and then we also have the decay mapped. So that's being automated here. Let's hear what that sounds like in context. So we have controls for how much the attack and decay is being modulated. So really cool for creating movement in an otherwise static loop. Sound design wise, pretty simple. White noise or noise looped sine and noise looped again. These will give a little bit of tone. So whereas some of the hi-hat presets are pretty simple, some of them have lots of ability to really sound a little bit different. Okay, let's look at this hook preset. So this is probably one of my favourite presets in the pack, certainly one of the most interesting from a sound design point of view. This one is for the geeks. Take note of these operators. We're in the standard algorithm where each is modulating each other and A being a carrier, and they are all fixed frequency. Now, A is very low in terms of the frequency. If we listen to this only, we get just a click. This is a square wave playing at 17.6 hertz, so barely even audible. But the way we're modulating it with other waveforms then starts to introduce tone. In the example, the pitch is automated, giving a kind of really interesting movement to the sound. And then we have these mapped to intensity and then madness. So you see, even at the lowest level, they are acting. So we're starting to introduce the harmonics and the tone, and that increases as these are brought up. And then more so with this one. And similar to the Dirt and Grit one, we can get quite different results based on where these are. We have the pitch here as well, so what if we randomize this a few times? So yeah, tons of possibilities with just these 4 macros. The other 2, incidentally, are for the LFO, which is mapped just to the filter. Sample and hold, so basically a random, and yeah, we can send that here and also change the rate, which is on sim mode. Yeah, really fun patch, especially for more experimental sounds. Let's look at the Donkmeister. Fairly similar to the one we were looking at before. Classic FM sound where we have a sine wave modulated by a sine wave, which is several octaves above. Just some nice spatial processing. LFO again, mapped to the filter for a bit of movement. And we could get a bit more wacky with this sound by increasing the coarse here. Just a nice classic donkey stab sound, good for all types of techno. And whilst we're at it, quite good for house basses as well. If we bring this back down here, set the tempo lower, make the kick a bit more sturdy. So yeah, loads of options with each sound. Let's look at this last one now. So again, quite classic FM type synthesis where we have each operator modulating the one after it in series. The interesting thing about this one is the coarse pitch of oscillator C. So we have this mapped here. And then when we increase oscillator C, really changes the timbre of the sound significantly. So yeah, it's really oscillator C that gives the vibe for this one. So there you have it, a long video, but this was a pretty brief overview of just some of the presets that are available with Zed Op Volume 1. I hope you liked this. I hope you found it helpful, informative, educational. If you did so, please leave us a like and subscribe and take a look at some of our other videos. That's it for now. Cheers. Bye.